Well, today in another one of our Survivor series, we're looking at this air-cooled 911. This car now is 25 years old. Can you believe it? It was introduced into North America in 1995, a year earlier in Europe. So this car was the very last air-cooled 911. By the way, I want to say a big shout out and a thanks to Core Motor Cars here in Vancouver for letting me drive this one. And I also did another one a couple months ago, a silver, same year, 95993, and I encourage you to click on that tab. If you're interested in these air-cooled 911s, especially the 993, good idea to watch both of them. And I made a mistake in that video. I opened up the back engine cover and I called it the trunk. I know better because I've owned two of these. And in fact, Cornelius at Core Motor Cars sold both of them for me. So if you're looking for anything unique, check out his site, coremotorcars.com. The link is in the description below. So this is kind of what was the base car back in the day. This is a base Carrera, or what's called a C2. It's not a wide body, it's not an S, it's just rear wheel drive, and a real purist car, and a car that delivers on many fronts. I've owned the S cars, the wider body cars. In fact, mine had the same color combo as this. It was black over cashmere. It was a Carrera 4S. The other 993 I owned was a Carrera 2S, which is the same as this, just with the wider body on it. But this is a very rewarding car to drive if you're a purist. And automotive enthusiasts and purists are attracted to these cars incredibly because they offer something that you just can't get and bottle any longer. There's something about these cars that people just absolutely desire to own. So I'm going to go through a little bit about what that is and why people want these cars. First of all, this, in my opinion, is the high point for Porsche design. I don't think, even with the new 992, which is a great looking car, it is as beautiful as this. And it all comes down to the curves. This is a car, when you park and you walk away, you look at it. It's like an animal attraction, like a man looking at a beautiful woman. You can't help yourself because it has all the right curves in all the right places. And it mostly comes around the back end. It's got to be said, this has got the nicest back end in the business, and it's the hips, the fenders, over the wheels, the way the fenders just cover the wheels perfectly, then the curves over the front wheels, and the headlamps are at a unique angle. We first saw this front end shape and a glimpse of what the 993 was to be with the 959 supercar that was out years before it. If you look at that car and then you look at this car, you can see the front end, the beginnings of the 993. So just proportionally a beautiful car. You have wider fenders at the front, even wider at the back, and a narrow waist, kind of like a Coke bottle design, and that's what you get. By the way, these are called air-cooled cars. Now, yes, they don't have a water system in them like you get with a modern car, but it's not entirely true. Yes, air is doing a lot of the cooling, but a significant portion is done by oil. There's a massive oil reservoir in this car, and when you start the car, the engine warms up, and once the engine oil is opened up, another channel opens up the whole circuit of this car. Oil gets pumped from the back right quarter panel, there's a big reservoir there, up into the front where it's basically cooled and then sent back. So it's really an air and oil cooled system. A massive amount of oil is used for these cars when you need an oil change. So let's get in. Check out the inside of this car. It's vintage for sure, and then we'll talk about, when we're driving, why these things are so collectible. Okay, the inside of a 993 is the end of this era of 911. The old, antiquated interior that ergonomically is a nightmare, but it is so vintage, so correct to the 911 that's what makes it charming. The heat controls are behind the steering wheel. You can't really see them when you're driving. You move your head, you figure that out. The radio is more over to the passenger than the driver. It's a bit of a reach. Ergonomically, it's not good. The 5 instruments behind the steering wheel are blocked many times by the steering wheel. The most important one is the tach right in front of you, and then the oil gauges. As I mentioned, this is a air-cooled car, but oil is so vital to this engine, you always have to keep an eye on the oil gauges. Now, speaking of the interior and the radio, this is the very first time I've ever seen this. This is a Continental Radio, a single DIN unit. This is not the original, but it looks factory correct. It looks really nice. And apparently these are really hard to get. So whoever owned this car before put that in there. You can now get what's called a classic radio, and it has Bluetooth, streaming audio, even has a little screen that gives you navigation. If I was buying a 993 and it didn't have this radio, because I'd just leave this one, it looks good, I would get that Porsche Classic radio. The other thing is, there's no adjustment in the steering wheel, none. You basically adjust your seat. And speaking of the seats, this is a rare option in this car. This car has full power seats, which my 911's never had, and they look fantastic as well. You sit very close to the dashboard, and then from the dashboard to the window is about that far. So your nose is right up against the window and looking down over the beautiful round front fenders. So it's a tiny little compact space that encapsulates the driver and the passengers, and they just don't make cars like this anymore. On size, this is about the same size as a new Boxster, I guess would be the best way to describe it. Little kids love the back seat of this car because it's a clubhouse only they are part of. So you're not gonna fit in there unless you're sort of under 8 or 10 years old. Now these cars actually have quite a bit of storage. So you get the frunk or the front trunk, pretty good room in there. You can put a couple overnight bags in there. And then the back seats, they have a parcel shelf that folds down, and you can easily get a couple of overnight bags in there. All right, so we're gonna go for a little drive. I'm gonna put the window down because this car has something. We're heading into a tunnel here that I want you to hear. Nice. This has the Pfister Stage 2 exhaust. So I had the Stage 3 on my cars, and basically what this is, I think the guy's name is Daryl or Darren Pfister in California. You send your mufflers, just the mufflers, to him. He opens them up and he takes out a big part of the baffling, and then he ships them back to you. And this really changes the sound of this car. And that's the one thing about an air-cooled 911 that is just not even close to being replicated with a modern Porsche, is the sound of the engine. Now, the nice thing is with the Stage 2s versus the really loud ones I had with the Stage 3, there's another tunnel here. Let's do it again. The nice thing about the Stage 2 versus the Stage 3 is that it's not too loud. And the engine is behind you. So when you're driving on the highway, the engine's behind you and the exhaust is behind you. It's not too droney. And that can be a problem if the exhaust is too loud. Trust me on this, because what I wanted to do was swap my Stage 3s to the Stage 2, and I highly recommend the Stage 2. Now this car has also been equipped with a KW Coilover Kit. It's the variant 3, which is the most sophisticated and expensive KW Coilover Kit that you can get for a 993. Apparently the parts alone for this setup were about $7,000 Canadian. Then it's got to be installed and aligned and put on new tires and all that kind of stuff. So a very premium coilover suspension that's fully adjustable. So right now it's set on sort of the mild setting for city driving. We're going over some bumpy roads now. It's not too jarring. These cars are so individual, the people that own them. I had, with my first 993, I had the Bilstein HD shocks and European springs. Way, way, way too rough. Like your teeth felt like they were gonna fall out. Then I went to a Coney called an FSD, or frequency selective dampening shock. I really liked those. They were cheap and they actually did a really good job. This is as premium as you're gonna get. So the person that buys this car is getting the suspension absolutely fully sorted, like the best of the best in this car. There are other suspension setups you can get. You can get what are called PSS 10s. So lots of stuff to read up on these cars and find out about, you know, if you're looking to buy one of these, find out what the suspension is. It makes a marked difference because these cars are all about the suspension, the setup, the tires, even the air pressure in your air pressure in your car can make a massive difference. It's like a really fine Swiss watch. When it's running right, man, there's nothing like it. So this car has a flat six engine, 272 horsepower, has a great sound, but 272 horsepower today is nothing. But what this car has is a soul and a presence and a feel that just can't be replicated by a modern Porsche. You have this visceral feeling and sound to it. Put the window down, going through the tunnel again. That is this connection to the car. And once you've had an experience in a car like this, it's like an itch you gotta scratch. So if you're somebody that is an automotive enthusiast and you've always loved the idea of a Porsche, if you try an older air-cooled car, it gets kind of under your skin to the point where you're like, I gotta get me one of those. And for most people, the high point is the 993. It was for me. It was no question. When I was shopping for an air-cooled 911, it was like, I want a 993. It just is the most beautiful car, in my opinion, that Porsche ever made. And let's go through the tunnel again. It just sounds fantastic. That never gets old. Pfister Stage 2. The Stage 3 is really loud. I had the Stage 3. Man, they sounded great. I love them. But after a while, it was like, okay, that's enough of that. There you go, my thoughts on the 993. It is, it's a coveted car for a reason. It's got a lot of little idiosyncrasies and quirks that make it what it is. If this car was perfect, then it wouldn't be as much fun. I wish I lived by this tunnel. I'd go through there every day. So once again, thanks to my friend Cornelius at Core Motor Cars. The link is in the description if you want to look at this car or any other car. This was originally an American car, came here to Canada, and could roll back across the border if you're interested in it. Beautiful suspension setup, nicely kept, great looking paint, fabulous interior. It's a time capsule. 25 years later, this car still has an intoxicating quality to it that once you drive it, once you taste it, once you see it and smell it, you want more of it.